I will never sleep again. I will never sleep again.
Welcome to Never Sleep Again.
Your source for sci-fi and horror movie reviews.
I'm Jonathan,
And I'm Veronica.
and today we will be reviewing Moonfall by Roland Emerich, 2022.
Yeah, just came out this weekend, so we've seen it. Hopefully you've seen it already as well, but if you haven't, just so you know, there will be spoilers in this review, as always. For our lengthier reviews, there are spoilers. However, if you want to get kind of a spoiler-free review, you can check out our previous first impressions video, where you can kind of see how we felt about the movie without knowing in detail what happens.
Right, so let's get into it. So you've been warned, so let's get into it. So the movie takes us all the way back to 2011 at the beginning, where we're introduced to three characters that are repairing a satellite. And so these three characters are Brian, who is played by Patrick Wilson, and we have Halle Berry, who's playing the character Joe, and we have Marcus. So after we're introduced to these three characters, they're having some fun, singing, playing around, and trying to work on the satellite, when an anomaly happens that kind of knocks them, just kind of knocks them around. The shuttle starts spinning, and during this turmoil, Marcus gets kind of just blown away and lost in space, so Marcus dies. However, Brian is able to save himself and save Joe and bring themselves to Earth, where NASA, they're not really believing the Anomaly story. The official story that they want to spin is that a solar flare or something like a solar flare happened, and because Brian was in command at the time, I think they're holding him responsible. So at this point, he becomes a disgraced astronaut, and what do they call those? Really dramatic, like the disgraced former hero or something like that. And we're shown a little boy watching a laptop and watching this report. The mother comes over and stops him from watching that, and then so we fast forward to 11 years later.
Yeah, we meet our next character, Casey Houseman, and he's played by John Bradley, right?
John Bradley,
yeah,
yep. John Bradley from Game of Thrones.
Game of Thrones,
yep.
Samwell.
Samwell, yep, that's right.
So we see him, and he makes a discovery, and he sees that the moon's orbit is actually shifting, and so he wants to kind of give this information to NASA, but nobody's listening. No one's paying him any attention. He tries to get in touch with Brian, and he finally does, and Brian doesn't want anything to do with him.
That was funny.
Nor NASA. Yeah,
that was funny.
It was funny. Yep. So, Casey, he's a fun character, but yeah, Brian doesn't want anything to do with him or NASA.
And pretty much everybody just treats Casey like he's a crazy person.
Yeah.
And so, since nobody believes Casey, he just goes ahead and just leaks all of his findings on the moon being out of orbit online.
Yeah, and then we see that back at NASA, they actually already knew about the moon being out of orbit. And so they had already assembled a team and sent a probe to the moon to kind of investigate further. This team goes there, and the team is actually attacked by the Anomaly, very similar to the way that the first team back in 2011 were attacked. And so everyone from this second team dies, unfortunately. And, NASA has to kind of put together another plan to deal with this, because during this time, We can see that there's a lot of destruction happening on Earth because of the effects of the moon having shifted its course. And Brian actually goes and finds Casey by this point.
Him.
Yeah,
He
he believes
him.
him now. So he goes and finds Casey, and they actually stick together for the duration of the film.
Of the rest of the movie, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so during the high tides, Casey almost dies. Casey almost dies, but Brian saves him.
Yeah.
So the next thing is Albert Hutchins, who is the director, and this he was the director of NASA in this. Yeah, he's just like, all right, I'm out, and he hands over his position to Jo, and so now she's the acting director, and she gets in contact with Brian and wants to bring him in for the mission.
Yeah.
And during this time, this is where she gets to also meet KC and finds out that he's the guy who leaked the whole the Moonfall.
Yes. Yeah. So the plan was actually to bring this device with them to the moon. It was an EMP device, and they were going to enable it once they got there and hopefully kind of disrupt the functions of this anomaly. So they all, got into the shuttle, Jo, Casey, and Brian, and they took off. Meanwhile, their kids were left behind at the base.
Jo has an exchange student, and she has a son. She has a little son. And Brian, he also has a son. And so while they're in the shuttle, they are trying to, they're trying to head to Colorado. That's Halle Berry's, Jo's son and exchange student and Brian's son are trying to make it there. Jo's ex-husband was able to make certain arrangements for them for when they get to Colorado, which will keep them safe.
Right. Yeah. And in addition to that, Brian's ex-wife, Brenda, is her name. His ex-wife, Brenda, and her husband, Tom, are actually in Colorado as well. They're staying at a cabin in Aspen. So, the kids will be safe. So they all end up meeting back up with Brenda and Tom, which is a good thing, because they're no longer by themselves.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, around this time, the moon has gotten so close to the Earth that the gravitational pull is really strong, and it actually starts to pull the oxygen away from the Earth. So they've got to search for some oxygen tanks, and they end up going to the fire department where there are some. So that was pretty helpful.
Yeah, so our team, they land on the moon, and then they take a tunnel into the moon, and once they're getting to the center of the moon, they start to see this gyroscopic center. They see all these mechanical and movable parts inside. This is what I think to be one of the cool parts of the movie. More on that later. So while they're there, they end up being attacked by the Anomaly, or I guess you could call it the entity or whatever. The Anomaly attacks them. It wrecks their ship. They lose oxygen, and and the whole team gets knocked out. But then they wake up and they have oxygen again, and not only do they have oxygen, but suddenly they have gravity. They're inside the moon, and Brian, he kind of goes to this place where the moon's operating system gives Brian a whole visual and audible history of the beings that were there before them. So at this point we're introduced to these beings that not only created humanity, but they also created an AI, which helped them have a very advanced civilization. But then that AI became self-aware and turned on that civilization, and so it's giving Brian the whole history, and they let Brian know that they need them to go and stop this anomaly.
And so they get back in the ship and they take off, and then the anomaly starts to try to destroy them once again.
Of course.
Yep. So they're fighting with the anomaly, and during this time back on Earth, we see that Tom actually dies. Unfortunately, he dies due to a lack of oxygen because one of the tanks got damaged, and he ends up giving that tank that he has, that's the viable tank, to his daughter. So fortunately, Tom dies due to lack of oxygen. And so back in space, Casey actually ends up taking the EMP device in a rover and kind of sacrificing himself so that he can destroy the anomaly, and he is successful in doing so.
Saves the world.
Saves the world, and Brian and Joe are able to get back to Earth on their shuttle,
where everyone is united, and they show us this this Death Star sort of looking moon.
Yeah,
in
moon.
Right, in the sky. It's revealed that's revealed to us, and it's also revealed to us that Casey is technically not dead because the AI had uploaded his consciousness to their to their software, to their
to their system.
Yeah, to their system.
And there's work to be done.
Yeah,
so.
there's work to be done. So what's teasing a sequel maybe?
or just letting us know that Casey gets to live out his greatest, sci-fi reality fantasy.
Right, because of alien technology, man.
Yep.
Okay,
and
well,
that's the end of the movie.
Yeah, that's the end of the movie, and well, you know why you're here. To find out what worked for us and what did not work for us. So why don't you go first? What worked for you?
Well, what worked for me? There were a few things. One of those was named Fuzz Aldrin.
Yeah.
That was Casey's cat. And I thought that was a cute name. It was a cute cat.
It was hilarious.
Yes.
I liked
Fuzz
Aldrin.
Aldrin. Yeah, he's a good cat too. I did like the scene with Casey and the kids where he was kind of impersonating Brian. And I thought that was kind of heartwarming. He was cute with the kids. The kids liked him. And, that was a nice little scene there. What else? I really enjoyed Casey kind of geeking out. The fact that he got to go to space, and he got to actually see a megastructure up close because he had these theories about megastructures, and his theory was proven correct. And so, he's just kind of taking in everything, and meanwhile these seasoned astronauts are just kind of about the job and just performing their tasks, and he's just really just taking it all in. So I thought that was a nice addition. It kind of put us viewers in that position, someone who wouldn't normally get to encounter those things, be in outer space. I know I'd be geeking out if I was able to do that. So pretty cool. And what else? I think kind of seeing the ancient humans, that was pretty interesting. I like that they didn't just tell us about them, but they actually showed us what life was like for them. We got to see what their civilization was like. We got to see how advanced their technology was. So that was pretty cool. Yeah. What about you?
Definitely. Well, I gotta say what really worked for me in the movie was Patrick Wilson, Halle Berry, and John Bradley. I think that they all really killed it. Pretty much these three were very believable to me throughout the entire movie. Some honorable mentions for me are, and I can't really remember all of these actors' names. So Halle Berry's former boss, the former director in there, I forgot his name. It's really bad that I can't remember his name because I normally do. I thought he was good, very believable. And Tom I liked how Tom's character
Yeah.
was in the movie, and I liked how they showed a stepdad being a really good dad. So that's something that worked for me in the movie. This movie had some pretty decent action sequences, and some of the CGI parts didn't really annoy me. I thought that looked pretty good.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Yeah. The way the moon looked on the inside, that was really cool. I liked its whole I like how it showed its system there. I liked the way that its AI worked. The whole sequence where Brian's being told and shown the history of that ancient civilization, that was really cool. That really worked for me in the movie. I wish that we could have gotten to things like that a little bit sooner, and that's why now we're going to take the time to talk about what didn't work for us. So, Veronica, what didn't work for you?
Well, one of the things that did not work for me was Brian's son, Sonny. I'm sorry. Sonny apparently was getting into some trouble, and we saw at one point that he had taken the police on a high-speed car chase.
Yeah.
And, throughout the movie, we could see that he had a little bit of, there was tension between him and Tom. That was never really explained from what I can recall. It's like Tom was very well off. And Tom really he was a good dad, actually. Like he was really,
a really good dad.
Yeah, he was. And he actually really provided for them really well. He even bought Sonny a car.
Yeah.
And, I don't understand why Sonny was such a knucklehead. It didn't make sense for the film, other than maybe he had some other issues with Brian that were spilling over. I know, maybe that was the issue. But there was a scene where Sonny actually had to go to court because of this, high-speed car chase that made it on the local news. And Brian was there, and Brian actually stands up, and he's really, shouting out things at the judge. He doesn't think it's fair, the sentencing, and it's like, oh my gosh, dude, you're right in the middle of a courtroom, have some decorum. And eventually we see that Sonny gets to walk because that was Brian's condition for actually joining the team. So I feel like Sonny got to be a brat the entire movie, and he didn't learn a thing. Like, he got to walk, he didn't have to pay for
He had two grown men who were willing to move heaven and earth just to get him out of jail. And his attitude after that was just horrible.
Because even Tom, I forgot, Tom hired the best lawyer to work on Sonny's defense. It just, Sonny didn't work for me. I'm so sorry.
Nah, they really went out of their way to make the kid an unlikable character.
Yeah.
And nothing against the actor.
No,
he did his job.
Yeah.
He did. He played the character really well. But it was just that was an interesting decision to take that character in that into that direction.
It really was.
Especially for the type of movie that it is. I thought that was confusing.
Another thing I didn't really care for was Tom's death. Yeah. So earlier we mentioned how Tom died for lack of oxygen. One of the oxygen tanks got damaged. If you ever go diving and you're with a partner, you share that oxygen so that, one person doesn't die while the other lives. Because as humans, typically we know how to hold our breath. So I didn't understand why it was necessary for him to die, and also in such an unnecessary manner. I understand his daughter was young, but if she had ever gone swimming, then she does understand the concept of holding your breath, kind of like when you're underwater. I could see Tom maybe taking one huge breath from the device and then passing it to his daughter so she can get a few breaths in while he's holding his breath for a longer time than her, and then switching it off. But, none of that was even attempted. He just immediately, and this is wonderful that he loves his daughter this much, and you should love your children this much, but it just wasn't necessary. I feel like he could have at least tried to get her to, just kind of hold your breath real quick while I take in a quick bout of air, and that didn't happen.
Right.
And then he dies, and then the oxygen returns, like, right after, so I didn't like that at all.
Yeah, this movie really didn't like Tom.
No, yeah.
Because the oxygen just conveniently came
Just
back,
came back.
after he lost consciousness. you know?
Yes. So then a couple of other things. There was a character when we met up with Tom and Brenda in Aspen.
Oh, I know what you're about to say.
Yes, there was a character like waiting at the gate to the gated community, and her name was Karen, and she shoots first and asks questions later, and I just thought that was a bit on the nose. So, you could do with that what you will, but I didn't. I don't know if I really cared for that. That was a little too much. But what else? The ancestors, the ancestors of the humans. When they showed us the flashback, the AI is very intelligent, the operating system that gave Brian this brief history lesson. And perhaps it was the AI's doing just so that Brian can understand what was happening, but the ancient humans, we can kind of, I guess I can, kind of assume that was the reason behind this. However, it didn't work for me. The ancient humans actually spoke modern English.
Yeah.
So I would have preferred hearing an ancient tongue, something created for the movie. I would have preferred that, and that didn't happen. So.
Or maybe have them not speak at all.
Or not speak at all.
Just show us.
Yeah, that would have been cool too if they had just done that. The scoring, as I mentioned in our spoiler-free review, I really did not care for the scoring of the music. I felt at times like I was watching a superhero movie, a comic book movie. It just didn't fit for me with the tone, and I would have preferred something different. So, yeah, those were basically the things I didn't quite care for. There is one other thing, and I'll just mention that briefly. I know I'm going on and on, but there's a lot to this movie I'm realizing, unfortunately, I didn't care for. But there were these moments where the characters were supposed to act, and they just kind of got stuck taking in the scenes and putting themselves in danger. Like when the high tides start to form, and we see Casey just kind of standing in the entryway of this building, and he's just watching the tides rising and making their way towards him, and he doesn't do anything to go up the stairs and get to safety. He almost dies. Something similar happens when they're about to board the shuttle. Casey is looking out in the distance, and a guy says, "Sir, we need to hurry." And it just shows Casey just kind of staring out at the distance, looking at the water, and oh my gosh,
just
are you
mesmerized.
gonna just stand there? Right. We all life as we know it is at stake. So it happened also with the kids. As the shuttle takes off, we see Sunny, Michelle, the exchange student, and Joe's son just kind of standing there watching the shuttle take off, while there's so much destruction headed their way. There are waves.
Right for them.
Waves, yep, and debris and all sorts of things headed for them. They're not getting out of the way. So that didn't really work for me. So what didn't work for you?
Well, so first, the Anomaly. The Anomaly itself, it's just a villain that doesn't work for me. Mostly because I found the villain to be just a little bit too derivative, which can be a little bit forgivable. So if you haven't seen this movie yet, or even if you have, for me, how we get the Anomaly in Moonfall is if you take Skynet from the Terminator, and you take the Sentinels from the Matrix. Then you pretty much get that Anomaly.
I could totally see that.
Yeah, they've got the weird tentacles, and they're going through the spacecraft they're going through the shuttle to kill people. When they kill these 3 astronauts during the movie, all you can see is tentacles that come in and kill them just one by one.
Right.
Just, reminded me so much of The Matrix. The fact that the Anomaly could be stopped with an EMP that's completely from The Matrix. Sorry. So, Roland Emmerich, if you're seeing this, it's nothing against you, man. Like, I'm sorry. So, next, you know, this can be something that some of you might disagree with me on or whatnot, but for me, there just wasn't a good enough explanation for why the AI of that the ancient humans, I guess, created. There wasn't any reason for why the software that was on the moon couldn't, the operating system that was on the moon couldn't simply reach out to humanity in some way from the moon. That really wasn't explained in the movie. And when I got to meet that operating system in the movie, it seems like it was very powerful, very intelligent. It's capable of doing so much that I'm left to assume that it could project a hologram to the world governments, or it could even maybe transmit a message through, from the satellite to like radios, or I felt like it could have reached out,
Something, right? It was so advanced.
Yeah.
It repaired the ship.
It repaired the ship, yeah. Yeah, it did. So yeah, it repaired the ship and gave them a super ship and allowed it gave it extra power and made their EMP stronger. So it's just I'm having a hard time understanding how it couldn't have reached out to humanity and saved more lives. Those 3 astronauts didn't have to die,
Right.
and they didn't have to almost die in order to make it to the moon's core. It could have been corresponding with humans sooner. It could have told them that nukes would never kill this thing. We don't have anything other than really a EMP that could stop the anomaly. It could have told them that beforehand. It could have given them the exact directions to get to the operating system on the moon. So that was a problem for me. There was this side storyline in there about like these robbers, where we told you that the kids got hijacked by these people. Well, later on in the movie, they're going to pick up these oxygen tanks, and they get hijacked by the same people. Again, I thought that this storyline, it had some potential, but I feel like it was only there to set up a high-speed car chase that happens while the tide is going crazy, and so they're, Tom, the stepdad, he takes one of the guns that they have, and he's like shooting at the people behind him, and they're shooting back at them. I just felt like that's the only reason why they introduced us to hijackers, so they can show that later. I felt like the scene worked just fine without the hijackers. It could have just showed them trying to get to the mountains, and having to navigate through all the destruction and turmoil without the whole added thing. However, as it stands, it was a decent action scene. It was pretty funny to see Tom like shooting at the guys and looking at the gun like, oh, that was so cool, or whatever he said. I like the actor that played as Tom.
Yeah.
I wish they did more with the character in there. Speaking of action, the action sequences were cool and they were exciting, but the movie took way too long to get to the exciting parts. I felt like they could have really just got us right into it. I've seen plenty of other disaster movies because that's pretty much what this is.
Yeah, it's a disaster movie.
Sci-fi disaster movie. Plenty of other disaster movies do really well at getting us right to the fun parts. So those are probably all of my problems with it. Now we're getting to our official rating for the movie.
All right.
So, what would you say?
Okay, so I'm a big sci-fi fanatic. I love science fiction movies. I love science fiction books, and I had been looking forward to this ever since I found out
You
about
were.
it last year, right?
I remember
I was
that,
so
you were.
excited, and I thought it was coming out later than it actually did. And when I found out it was coming out in February, I was so excited. And I was like, we gotta see it, we gotta see it. And I had high hopes for it. Disaster films are like some of my favorite like subgenres.
They are. She's not
I love it.
exaggerating.
And I think some of the best disaster films are the ones where you can see all the destruction that's being caused by whatever natural occurrence is happening, but there's still hope at the end. Unlike movies that we saw recently, Don't Look Up, which was good. I enjoyed Don't Look Up.
Right.
But unfortunately, the end was like really like sad.
Sad.
It was like sad.
It's a little disturbing.
Yeah. So even though it's cool to see an ending like that as well, because I do like endings like that too, but endings where there is, you know, they end on a more positive note, I kind of prefer. You get to see all the destruction, but there are some people saved at the end. So, you know, I love disaster films, but this one just did not do it for me. And for that reason, I'm gonna have to give it, I hate doing this. I think I have to give it a bargain bin. I have to give it a bargain bin. I want to give it like a low streaming, but I feel like a high bargain bin for me. That's like a really low rating. I feel so bad. But I was just really disappointed. I was let down. The actors, I enjoyed the main cast of actors, but just the movie as a whole, it just did not, there wasn't enough substance. I didn't really like the premise. Like, I liked the idea of a moon that was going to either come crashing into the earth or was falling apart. And just, you know, to find out that it's actually, you know, a Death Star underneath there, you know, just like this Death Star structure.
Right.
I felt that was a kind of, you know, hollow. And, you know, no pun intended. But yeah, so it's gonna be a bargain.
Of course,
bin.
it's hollow. It's a mega structure.
It's a mega structure. There's things inside, and yeah, no, it's gonna be a bargain bin for me. What about you?
Right. Well, you know, there were some things that the movie did do well. Like you said, it had a happy ending. I will say that I wish the movie had a little bit more stakes in there, like maybe show the anomaly somehow get onto Earth and like attack people there. That would have raised the stakes. But alas, now it's time for the rating. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm going to give it, just because I like the actors involved, I liked a lot of the actors in this movie, I'm gonna go ahead and give it a high bargain bin. I wanted to give this movie a low stream it really, really bad, but I have to agree with Veronica here that it was really a letdown. I expected more from the same director that gave us Stargate. We loved the Stargate movie, and so well, I will admit that when I first saw the trailer, I didn't know it was him. But I had high hopes for this movie. I wanted to give it a stream it really bad.
I thought you were going to give it a stream it. It seems like you liked it a little bit better than me.
I liked it a little bit more than you, only because, you know, well, once we got to the action, and although Tom died during the action, which I thought was stupid, we missed out on an opportunity to show Sonny in a really heroic moment, or even Michelle, the exchange student, have a really heroic moment by saving Tom. So that was corny that Tom died like that. But just too much of it didn't work for me. So I'll give it a bargain bin, but a high bargain bin. So I'll give it a higher bargain bin. It's not the worst movie that you can see.
No.
People. So so yeah.
You should still see it. You should
still see it.
It's still worth seeing, so you can compare it to other disaster films or just science fiction films that you've seen before. Right. And, you know, maybe your opinion differs from us. You know, maybe you loved the movie, right, and, you know, you'd watch it again and again. And that's fine. Let us know. Let us know if you might rate this movie in a different category than we did.
Right. And remember, if you don't get movies from the bargain bin, if you don't stream movies, if you don't go to the movies, we won't have any movies.
Yes.
So yeah, please go ahead and see it. And like always, if you disagree with us, let us know.
Let us know in the comments.
Let us know in the comments, and we'll hopefully get some dialogue going.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess that's it for today. This has been Never Sleep Again. I'm Jonathan.
And I'm Veronica.
And remember,
Stay awake.